Individual countries will not be allowed to veto the approval in the Council. Instead, it will be decided by a qualified majority vote. Migrant issues have become a messy tug of war between unity and each country doing its own thing. In recent years, the issue of migration has become increasingly politicized, with some countries arguing that the EU is too open to immigration. The EU's persistent fixation on migration has sown seeds of discontent in conservative strongholds like Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia. One glaring example is the clash of values, as the EU's push for a more open and inclusive approach to immigration collides with the deeply ingrained traditional values of these nations.
Welcome to TFI Global, the antidote to mass delusion.
From day one, the EU has been all about migrants and migration. The kind of obsession that just won't quit. It's their favorite topic, always in the mix, making things complicated. Whether it is dealing with crisis, sorting out disagreements, or just figuring out who's in and who's out, migrants are front and center. But here's the kicker: there is no clear game plan. The EU is stuck in a loop of debates and head-scratching decisions, leaving member states at odds. Once more, the EU has rolled out a head-scratcher of a policy that's ruffling feathers in Central Europe like never before. A provisional agreement on the EU's migration and asylum pact, reached in December between the European Council presidency and the European Parliament, has been accepted by a qualified majority of EU ambassadors. The agreement, which was refined and approved on Thursday, February 8th, is fiercely opposed by nations in Central Europe, since it basically aims to manage, not stop, migration, compelling member states to either accept unwanted migrants or face penalty. We Slovaks, Hungarians, and Poles voted against the legislative acts that speak of so-called solidarity. Unfortunately, we were overruled by several member states. Slovak Interior Minister Matúš Šutaj Eštok said of the deal that includes a mandatory solidarity mechanism forcing countries to choose between accepting migrants or paying hefty sums into common fund. In accordance with the agreement, member states would have to reimburse each rejected immigrant with 20,000 euros, and 30,000 asylum seekers would be allocated annually around the entire bloc. This would equate to 285 migrants in Slovakia, or 5.7 million euros annually. Member states would be asked to accept more migrants in time of crisis, but they would not have the choice to refuse the migrants in exchange for a punishment. Georgi Bekondi, the main domestic security advisor to the Hungarian Prime Minister, criticized the agreement, telling Hungarian media, "This is a serious violation of our sovereignty. Choosing whom we wanted to accept would be decided neither by Hungarian authorities nor by Hungarian law, but by European Union headquarters." Hungary and Slovakia both criticized the idea that in an emergency, some asylum proceedings would be transferred out of frontline nations to lessen their burden, compelling other states to take in migrants and consider their asylum applications. According to Matúš Šutaj Eštok, asylum procedures will be moved to Slovakia, which will mean de facto that the migrants concerned will never leave Slovakia again. In addition, Poland rejects the agreement, claiming that it may potentially constitute an area of dispute between the EU institutions and member states in the future because it does not strike an appropriate balance between responsibility and solidarity. According to an opposition MP, Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that his administration would not accept any relocated asylum seekers under the terms of the agreement, but it might be willing to pay the sums determined by the European Commission. Despite the government's praise for the December accord, the Czech ambassador abstained in Thursday's vote. The reason for the apparent reversal of opinion could be that the opposition in the Czech Republic, led by former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, denounced the agreement, calling it a call to arms for millions of migrants to Europe, pushed Prague to emulate Warsaw and Budapest. Given that immigration will be a major issue in this year's European elections, the centre-right Liberal government may be strengthening its stand. The new regulations aim to expedite the deportation of unapproved asylum applicants to their home countries, while also attempting to carry out more thorough border checks. Individuals who pose a security risk or whose asylum claims are unlikely to be granted would also be kept in detention facilities at the border and barred from entering the bloc. Human rights organizations are concerned about the possibility that migrants may spend up to 6 months in detention centers while their asylum petitions are being processed as stipulated in the agreement. The provisions need to be accepted by the European Council member states and the European Parliament before the deal can be officially ratified. Individual countries will not be allowed to veto the approval in the Council. Instead, it will be decided by a qualified majority vote. Migrant issues have become a messy tug of war between unity and each country doing its own thing. In recent years, the issue of migration has become increasingly politicized, with some countries arguing that the EU is too open to immigration. The EU's persistent fixation on migration has sown seeds of discontent in conservative strongholds like Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia. One glaring example is the clash of values as the EU's push for a more open and inclusive approach to immigration collides with the deeply ingrained traditional values of these nations. Additionally, the imposition of mandatory migrant quotas has sparked resentment, with leaders in Hungary, for instance, openly rejecting the idea of external interference in their sovereign right to control their borders. The discontent is palpable in the reluctance of these countries to comply with EU directives, as seen in Poland's resistance to accepting migrants under specified quota. This clash of priorities has not only strained the relationship between these nations and the EU, but has also fueled a growing sentiment of frustration and defiance against what is perceived as an overreach of authority by Brussels. In a sense, the EU's unwavering focus on migrants has become a flashpoint, igniting discontent and shaping a narrative of resistance in the conservative landscapes of Central Europe. The EU's migrant mania isn't just a policy issue. It's a drama that keeps unfolding with no end in sight.